Welcome to Conversations, episode 5. Last month, we had our good friend Jesse Fairfax join us, and the conversation definitely took a turn when he brought up a musician by the name of Charles Hamilton. That was a music-centric discussion. This month on Conversations, we have a very special guest. And as you know, this is the show where we talk to people from all different walks of life. And this month is no exception, as we have a woman who, in some ways, you can say is cinematically inspired. That's right. We have a 3D rendering designer of television and movie homes. Her trademark cinematically inspired design can be seen on Entertainment Tonight, as well as her own YouTube page, Mockingbird Lane. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would love to introduce to you Marina Coates.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having us. So, Marina, if you don't mind, you just tell us a little bit about Mockingbird Lane and how you got started with this whole project.
Okay, sure. My website is mockingbirdlane.design. And what happened is I went back to school when my kids were all grown and I got a degree in architecture. And I was just freelancing after I graduated and doing 3D modeling and walkthroughs of like hotels and houses and things. But because I was freelancing, of course, there would be these lulls where I didn't have any work. And when one of those happened one time, I was getting some pictures ready to send off to developers, and I thought, you know what I'd really rather do? I want to build the Dick Van Dyke house and walk through it. I'd always just been enthralled with that home and thought it'd be so cool to walk around inside of it. Of course, it's not real, but now I had the skills. So I made that one, and it was like I was just immediately hooked. And then I did Bewitched, and then my daughter talked me into Full House. I did that one. But after that, I couldn't stop. And so at one point, she said, my daughter, you should start a website because other people might want to see this too. And so I started that website. And then it really took off when HGTV bought the Brady Bunch house, because I happened to be working on that exact house just before they announced that. And then from there, I started also redesigning the homes. In other words, let's say I'd take the Bewitched home and I'd think, well, what would they be living like today? And so I'd remodel it. And that was when I then started the show on Cinematically Inspired Design, because it's two different stages. There's the TV stage, but my design comes from the cinema when I redesign the homes. And so I started a whole show around that concept of how you can take those principles of design that we absolutely fall in love with. We fall in love with these movie homes, but we never take those principles into our own homes, and I don't know why. So I started doing that.
Yeah, I was when Lyle first made me aware of you, because we're always looking for, interesting guests to have on the show. He linked me to your Twitter account, and I was instantly fascinated. I went to the website, I was reading the blogs a bit, and I noticed that you said, and I quote, that you always had an absolute obsession with houses, which I could kind of relate to, because ever since I was a kid, I just would always do this thing where I'd sit in the back seat and we'd drive by houses in different neighborhoods. And I would always imagine what the interiors were like what's filling the rooms. It was just sort of this thing in my head, and I would make up these scenarios. Well, who's living there, and what are their lives like? And now I do sort of like food delivery driving on the side, and because of that, when I deliver food, I sort of get a peek into people's houses, when they open the door, and it's just a small glimpse into their homes, which are intimate spaces. It's like a look into their world. So to see that you were doing this and sort of taking, these shows and these like different things from film and cinema and sort of fleshing it out, I was like, okay, this is great. And I was familiar with a lot of it because growing up, I would watch Nick at Night, which is basically like
Yes.
a segment, on Nickelodeon. and they would show like I Love Lucy, the Brady Bunch, and that's how I got familiar with those shows growing up in like the 90s, early 2000s. So I definitely knew a little bit of the houses that you were sort of redesigning and completely bringing to life in 3D
And
space.
you have those iconic um, set pieces like the Brady Bunch, for instance. The staircase is iconic. I mean, everyone knows the Brady Bunch staircase, which is
Yes,
kind of
absolutely.
part of pop culture at this point. But, as you said, a lot of these homes are not real homes, they're sets. So, how do you kind of fill in the blanks that aren't there?
Great question. So it depends on the home. Some of them, like Bewitched and Leave It to Beaver, we get to see all four walls. Obviously, they weren't all up at the same time, but at least we know what was there. But
Right.
then there's ones like Mary Tyler Moore. We don't see that whole other side of the apartment, and it just has to be huge. I took the measurement. I don't remember what it is anymore, but it was huge. And so with that one, I looked at the house they show us on TV, just made sense of what would be on the other side of that house. And from there, worked it. I knew there would probably be another window on the other side that matched, and that it wouldn't go much further past that. There's a lot of little. It's like detective work when I do that.
Yeah, I was wondering about that actually because I figured, as far as I wanted to actually ask you about this, like how long does that research process take before actually beginning? Because I figured I was reading a bit, and my theory, I guess, was kind of confirmed when you were saying that you pretty much, I guess, binge the show and watch and rewind a bunch of times to sort of get, the minute details correct and everything, and I guess probably sort of take like running notes as you're watching. Are you also like digging up as much as you can about the set and who designed it? Like, do you actually ever come across any like floor plan documents or anything like that?
Yes, actually, I'm working on the Munsters right now, and so I want to have it done in time for Halloween. And
Okay.
someone saw that I was doing that, and they private messaged me and said that they work for Universal. And so I was just out in LA on Thursday for the premiere for the Brady Bunch
Oh wow.
renovation. Yeah, and while I was there, he said I was only there one day, but he took me on a private tour. I got to go inside the home, but then because the Munster home, I thought it would just be a facade, but when I got there, they've actually built it out. So the inside
Wow.
doesn't look anything, obviously, like the show, but it allowed me to go upstairs and look out that iconic little spooky gambrel window. And I looked across the street, and across the street from the Munsters is the Leave It to Beaver home, which I just thought was awesome.
Wow.
But then somebody else messaged me and said that they had the actual plans. I don't know where they got them. I think it was just
Wow.
online, but they sent them to me. So I've been looking over those. But usually, here's what happens. Even if somebody has what's supposedly the design, because there's books out there that have floor plans, they're trying to show you how you could actually build a house like that. But
Right.
when you watch the show and you stop it and pause it, you'll notice that almost all of the walls actually angle out. They're splayed out at odd angles that we really wouldn't build a home like that at. So I don't just go by those. I watch the show, like you said, pause it, pause it until I get it right, until all the walls meet together at the end, and then I know, okay, I'm probably within the ballpark.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I figured as much because um I sort of know a little bit about that world because I went to college for like audio design and everything. So they teach us a bit about like set design and like microphone placement and things like that. So you learn a lot about sets and how sort of things have to be constructed to accommodate that. I guess that will lead to my next question because I was reading as you're like recreating these houses, a lot of time you find out that they're not exactly realistic or like practical. What's I guess been that single biggest like my whole life is a lie moment? I guess when you're discovering like the discrepancy between what's presented to us like as the viewer and what's actually possible or accurate from an architectural standpoint.
Yeah. Well, every home has had a surprise.
Okay.
Oh boy, one of the biggest ones, and I put just a post about just this on my website is, and I call it Brady Bunch House of Lies.
Yeah, and that's the one I read. Yeah.
And that's tongue in cheek. I love the Brady Bunch house because I did get some flack from people saying you should call it a house of lies. But yeah, that one, what I did is as I was modeling it, I was realizing, well, this has to be so different on the outside than what we were shown, which we all know. But it just occurred to me, oh my gosh, this must be like nothing like the same. So I ended up showing what the exterior would look like if it matched what was going on inside according to what we saw on TV.
Right.
And it turns into this cantilever tarantula looking thing. I don't know. Yeah. It's pretty funky. That was
that's
fun.
what I saw like the finish and I'm like, wow, okay. If I was driving down a block and I saw that, I would have a million questions.
Well, and supposedly, it was designed by Mike Brady, an architect, which makes it even funnier.
Wow. Right, yeah. Okay, cool.
But another one was when I did the Dick Van Dyke Show, which was the first one I did. That was my first aha. The bay window in the living room would actually smash into the bay window in the master bedroom. They can't coexist. So I'm assuming the set didn't ever have someone go from that window to the window inside. It just can't coexist.
Right.
And that's interesting that because of those things like that, you're not going to see certain shots like that in the show, where you're not going to see someone go from that area to that area. And you kind of understand while doing this, the stage blocking that's going on.
Yes.
Now, my question to you is, a lot of the stuff that you're remodeling are classic television shows. How do you feel about the design elements in those shows versus some of the stuff we're getting now on television? Do you feel like aesthetically things have become more background? Do you feel like, because I know I'm trying to think of like iconic television houses from the past decade, and I'm kind of drawing a blank.
What's interesting when you ask that, I realized that I don't watch a lot of current TV, so that's interesting. But when I took the Bewitched home, at one point I was going to use it to show a before and after of Cinematically Inspired Design, and so I tried to dumb down the living room. So I tried to make it all plain and boring, but I left the architectural elements, and when I was done, I thought, I can't use this. This looks great. So the bones of it were so good, like they really thought about all the architectural elements. Just fascinating.
That's interesting. Yeah. You know what? Now that I think about it, this decade, American Horror Story did 2 seasons in particular. One of them was Murder House, the first season, which took place in Los Angeles. And the 3rd season, Coven, was filmed in a house in New Orleans. And you get a lot of those houses in these seasons. Now, I should warn you, it's a little grisly, but those are the only 2 that come to mind from this decade, because I feel like a lot of shows aren't even so housebound anymore. Whereas, you have the traditional sitcom where, for instance, Seinfeld in the 90s, Jerry's Apartment, there were things about it that as a kid I would look at and go, okay, what cereals does he have in his cupboard? What's behind that door over there? Because you only really got one static shot of his living room and kitchen area.
Yes. Yeah.
So
that would be a fun one to do.
In what you're doing, when you have to come up with these things that you didn't see without a floor plan, without the camera ever going there, that's where the redesign comes. And, taking those creative liberties and remodeling them with your own unique design style, which you've trademarked Cinematically Inspired Design.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Cinematically Inspired Design concept?
Yeah, so a lot like what you were talking about. You said when you were little and you're driving down the street, you would imagine houses and who's in them. I'm guessing when you watch a movie or a TV show, you would be fixated on what's going on in the background, right? more
Right.
than the plot line. Yeah. So that's me too. Ever since I was little, I would watch movies, and that's what I was looking at. That's what I cared about. Um, and that just carried out through my whole life. In fact, after I was married, my husband would say, "What do you want to watch tonight?" And I'd say, "I want to watch like a Western from the 50s." And he'd, look at me like, "Why? That doesn't sound like you." But it was because of all the heavy use of wood and the red that they always used and the Technicolor, it was those things. So when I went back to school, then it kind of all came together when I was learning design and designing houses when I was in the architecture program. And then when I had a free moment, that's when I finally got to start using all those principles I'd just been, storing in the back of my brain all those years when I got to do the redesigns, because they are geniuses. So if you think about it, they have about 2 hours to tell us everything we need to know. And I'll probably get this quote wrong, but it was something like this. Alfred Hitchcock, who's one of my favorites, said, and he cared about every detail, that if you do a movie right, the sound can be off and you'll know exactly what's happening. And so a big part of that is we need to know who these characters are, and the design like fills in the blanks for us, is how
Right.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually branches off great into my next question. I guess so. I feel like one of the, like you speak about Alfred Hitchcock and a lot of these older shows that I think gets lost in the modern era is, yeah, those details are paid attention to, and because of that, those homes, they had character. They were almost characters themselves, and I would notice those things. But it was something you were saying on your website, as far as that design in cinema, like everything from furniture choices to hues and colors presented. Um, just the idea that those are deliberately chosen and arranged to help tell the story. I actually hadn't really thought about it like that until I read that. You know, it's sort of that, I guess, blank space that makes all the difference between, the plot and what's actually being said dialogue wise and the things that surround it. Um, I guess, when did you first have that realization or like that light bulb that went off where it's like, these colors and how these objects are arranged, like this actually contributes a lot to what's happening in the story.
Well, it was kind of always there, and it kind of evolved. So, like over the years, doing my own home and other homes, in fact, I even did a chimp village for the LA Wildlife Way Station. And
Okay.
what did I do? I went to the cinemas. I started watching Elephant Walk, and I was inspired from things by there to redo it. It's just always been there, but it was when I started redesigning these TV homes, showing how that family might live now, that I put a name to it, I guess is what you could say. And because I was using those elements, but now it was putting them into play for other people to see examples of.
Right.
And I need to specify to the people who are out there listening, these aren't static images of what the house would look like. These are fully rendered, animated 3D tours.
Yeah, like hyper immersive, like very cool. Like, I was watching a few of the videos and I was like, yeah, this is my kind of thing. Like, this is my jam because like I love things that are that thorough and immersive.
Oh, I can't wait to do the Munsters, because what I want to try to do for the first time is animate an object within the scene, because up till now I'm walking through the houses, right? And we have to have the dragon Spot, right, come out from under the staircase. So I want to figure that out.
Wow,
That's awesome.
cool.
I mean, you're doing something that I couldn't even fathom even knowing how to do. It's so cool. And when I saw your video for the first time, I think it was the first time I clicked on a tweet on Twitter, read through the replies, and didn't hate myself afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Oh, they can be so nasty, can't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, but they're pretty
really.
nice on Twitter. It
But
hasn't been too bad.
when I saw your account, it really struck a chord with me because in some ways I do feel like ever since I was a little kid, and I'm like a huge horror fan, so to hear that you're
Uh-huh.
doing the monsters really excites me. And when I was younger, Tales from the Crypt on HBO, which I probably shouldn't have been watching at my age, it opens with a tour
Yeah.
through the gates, down the path into the home, or the castle or whatever, and they go through the um, like open
It's
space
like a
living
foyer and then like
foyer,
a
yeah, like
dining
something like
area.
that, and it
Yeah.
kind of goes around, down the stairs, through the door, goes right up to the coffin. The crypt keeper pops out. And I was always, as a kid, I don't know why I thought this, but I thought one day the camera was going to take us up the stairs instead of down the stairs.
Right.
I was
Mhm.
dying to see just another inch of this haunted home. So,
Yeah.
what you're doing is kind of, in some ways, you're
Fantasy
you're getting
fulfillment,
to,
really.
yeah, you're getting to explore these places that have filled us, throughout the years with so much joy and so much wonderment, and kind of complete the vision.
Yeah, like scratching an itch, right? So you
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
made me write down Tales from the Crypt, HBO. It's been so long. I want to go back and look at that, because what if I could take us upstairs? We'll see.
Oh my
That would
goodness.
be
I
great.
mean, I would lose my mind. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Mel and I are both Tales from the Crypt super fans. I would propose. So
I'm going to
Yeah.
look at that today. That sounds interesting.
But yeah, just to sort of build on what he was saying on Twitter, like, yeah, like that place can be a nightmare sometimes. So it's always striking to me when I see someone like your account and what you do, see someone so dedicated and focused on a singular thing, and like just make me think, wow, like I never would have imagined this is possible. Like,
Hmm.
and I love discovering things like that. So this was, the second he showed the account, I'm like, oh yeah, we have to try to reach out to her and
Cool.
see if,
Cool.
because this is awesome. Like, yeah, I
Everybody
was
has their little obsession, right? And that's
yeah,
yep.
mine. Always been mine. Yep.
yeah. I'm definitely, I have a soft spot in my heart for, I guess, obsessives or people who, like will stop at nothing to sort of get to whatever it is at the end of that tunnel. Like, I'm sure, in watching these episodes and everything, it's just sort of this constant, what if, or how could I possibly? I know it's like the kind of thing that'll keep you up at night. So to see this actually come to fruition
Mm.
is incredible to me, like literally incredible. And I have to wonder, because you were mentioning like getting the dragon to sort of pop out from underneath the staircase.
With fire, hopefully. We'll
Yeah.
see.
I guess that leads to my next question. I'm guessing it probably is a case by case sort of deal depending on the project, but if there is an average, how long on average does it take to complete these 3D models?
Hmm. Well, with I Love Lucy, that apartment, I always figure out the square footage too, and it was just about 1,000 square feet. And for some reason, I just pumped that out in a week, and I wish I could recreate
Wow.
that magic.
Wow.
Yeah, but like with the Brady Bunch home, I started it back in July of last year, and so I would bet I spent 8 months on it. But partly that was because people kept saying, like, I want to see Greg's attic bedroom. I want to see the backyard. And so I kept adding things that I hadn't finished yet. Um, yeah, but if I was going to do an average, like the Munsters, I'm predicting, I hope I'm right, it'll take me a month to get it wrong. But I put in some long hours. This is about all I do now. I would say maybe 10 hours a day on these houses.
Wow. Huh.
Well, the work is definitely top notch, and I mean, this is such a unique approach to architecture, to fandom of film and television. I was actually going to ask you, because you mentioned it. I noticed that on some of these homes, you have home stats, estimated square footage, estimated cost as of the current year when this was made, 2018, which you have estimated the Brady Bunch house is 1,800,000.
Yeah, and that actually ended up being what it was originally on the market for. So I thought, okay, uh,
Wow.
the way I find that, but it sold for way more because it was the Brady Bunch house.
Right.
What I do is I go to a real estate site and type in that neighborhood of where that home was supposedly supposed to be. So like Fort Dick Van Dyke, New Rochelle, things like that. And then I put in the bedrooms, the square feet, and bathrooms, and then see what the average, what they're going for sale for. That's how I come up with that.
Wow. So there's much more than, I guess, just like architecture and like, knowing the software. Like, yeah, this is this blows me away even more because like I guess me, like a lot of people, I'm not the greatest with math calculations and things like that. So to know that that is an aspect of it just makes it, all the more impressive.
Originally I was just doing stills of the homes, and I was in communication with the design and build manager of the Brady Bunch project, HGTV's project. And he's the one that said, have you ever tried Lumion? And that's this software I actually hadn't heard of till that point that allows us, that's what I use, that allows us to walk through it, and it looks so realistic. So last Christmas, I gave that software to myself as a Christmas present and started redoing those homes so that we could walk through them. And it's so intuitive and fairly easy. I love it. You can even add rain and birds flying by. I want to try all that with the Munster house.
That's cool. That's very cool. Huh. Wow. I guess is there ever I guess have you ever had like a hang up on a project where it's like one thing you were trying to get perfectly right and like maybe you had to like watch a tutorial or something or just like keep messing with it until it gets right, or has
Every
everything
time, every time, because I'm always trying to do some new thing. You know how that
right?
is. Yeah, like this one, I got to figure out how to animate. We'll see how to do that, how to add fire. Yeah, keep learning. Oh, another thing I like to do when you were talking about the real estate thing, the statistics. You know how often you watch a show, usually a TV show, but it's in the movies too, a lot, where you realize there's no way that person with that occupation could afford that home. Yeah.
Right.
So I like to figure that out too. How much would that occupation, that family be making in today's dollars? Could they afford the home? And rarely, rarely do they match.
Oh, man. It seems like a lot of these TV families were doing some shady dealings on the low.
Yeah, yes, I'm sure they were.
So I'm actually shocked that you said you kind of just got into this in terms of, until your kids all moved out and everything like that. And I think that's a pretty inspiring story for a lot of people who have a passion for something and, they haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, well, it even surprises me. So the first time I went to school, and I won't say when, but it was a long time ago when I went to college, I wanted to be an architect, but I know you won't believe this, but girls just weren't architects back then. I mean, there were mavericks, and I just wasn't one of them. And so then I wanted to be a mom. I had my kids, and then went back to school when they were all grown because I thought, well, what am I going to do now? But I've thought about it, and I'm actually really glad because back then I wouldn't have known these programs, and I bet you I wouldn't have wanted to learn them. I would have just stuck with what I knew. And and I have a story I got to tell about that, just to show you how different times were back then. So the architecture building I went to when I went back to school, when it was built, and I think it was the late 70s, if I remember right, they actually didn't have any female bathrooms in there. The professors told us that. Yeah. And what's funny is architects are supposed to look to the future. Like, they want to make sure that building is going to last 50 years and still be applicable to whoever's in it.
Right.
And they just didn't think there would ever be. But I'm glad some women decided to be architects and break the mold, because there were female bathrooms when I went back to school.
Okay, well, that's good. It's glad to know that was updated. Okay, so I mean, I would consider you sort of a pioneer, in a lot of ways too. Wow, that's
It was
like baffling
awesome.
to
I
me.
loved it. I loved going back to school. One of the professors one day, he said, well, actually, that's not true. There was one female bathroom. It was marked secretary, and it was in the office.
Oh, Lord. That's horrible.
So they've come a long way.
Yeah, I'd say. Wow. Huh. And I think that wasn't all that long ago, so.
No, I know, it boggles my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happened fast.
How does inspiration hit for you? Are you just one day watching something on TV and you just something clicks, or do you have like a list of things you'd like to get to at some point?
Well, next to my computer, right where I am now, I have probably 100 movie homes I've printed out that I want to do.
Wow.
So I've got like, oh, so much inspiration. I just need to clone myself. But if you're talking about like the actual design, yes, when I'm watching a movie, like every time there's something, or even when I'm scrolling through my Instagram feed or whatever, there'll be something that catches my eye that thinks, I can use that. How can I use that? And so I save those things or I write it down and it'll come into play later at some point.
And in a
I
way,
can.
it's almost like, I'm sorry, Mel,
I'll go ahead.
but the less you see, the more inspiration, I suppose, because for something like, let's take Home Alone, for instance. Home Alone was actually shot outside of Chicago, I think in Schaumburg, Illinois.
Okay.
And the Home Alone house, you see pretty much all of it in that movie. And you can
Hmm.
go online and see inside of the house empty because it's a real house. I think what you're
Right.
doing, where you're kind of filling in the blanks, is where that inspiration can really be drawn from. I think that's really the most interesting part of what you do.
It's one of the funnest parts. I like when there isn't a wall there and I get to think, well, what would be there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What just makes sense? Yep.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to um that, I guess, willingness to just dive in and figure things out. Like you were saying, you just decided to go back to school and pick up these programs, and um I can relate to, like, maybe in the past not probably being as willing, because I was like that when I was younger, just like, I had the idea, but it's like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to like take the time to learn all that. But like Lyle and I, the past few years, we're artists and we've been working on music and things of that nature. And part of what we do for inspiration is we intake a lot of different things. Lyle went to film school um, for some years,
Hmm.
and part of, I guess, the curriculum that I would ingest, as he's sort of like the creative director, executive producer sort of deal, and I would make the music. But he would feed me these films from all different eras, like as far back as the 20s to as recently as like this year. And I found that a lot of the older films just had a certain warmth and depth that maybe some of the more modern films didn't. And I think a lot of that comes from the set, the houses, things like that. Like I watched not as a part of like what we're doing, but when I was in school, I took a film class and we watched Rear Window.
Oh,
And
it's one of my favorites. Oh.
yeah, and that like blew me away, because I was like, why don't they make films like this
Oh
anymore?
my gosh.
But
Yeah.
just that setting of mostly him sort of being confined to that apartment space, it's just it was just ripe for my mind to just fill in so many different things. I mean, even like the complex he was
Hmm.
living in, and just him watching out of the window into the different interiors and everything. Um, I think that's just, it's cool to know that there's somebody, and that somebody would be you, that is also thinking, like, how far does this actually extend, beyond what
Hmm.
we're seeing? How far can I take this? How can I flesh this out? So you're
Yes.
you're
Yeah. Don't you, when you're watching something like that, don't you picture yourself in that apartment like you're living
yes.
there? Yeah. So
Yeah.
there has to be more than what you're seeing. So I'm curious, I have a question for you since you are both really into music. When you
Mm-hmm.
watch a movie, are you focused on the music?
For
Lyle, do you
me,
want to answer that one first?
um, sometimes, like if I really like the music. So, for instance, there are some Italian films in the horror and crime genre that there was a band named Goblin that did the music for. And there's one film called, it translates to Beyond the Darkness. Don't watch it, it's very, very gory. But
Okay.
the musical score is amazing. Like, I'm so into the music. It's kind of like funky, and it's got like a nice groove to it. So when I'm watching something like that, I'm only focused on the music, really.
Yeah.
But not always, because sometimes I'm like, I'm weird because like I'm a set piece guy. I am very visual with stuff. So I like, even in horror, I don't like rewatching stuff unless there's memorable makeup effects or set pieces, or if it's like an old Hammer horror film and it's like this really really rich technicolor. So many reasons, honestly. I think certain films I go to specifically for the acting, and just there's like a virtuoso performance in it. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's the music, sometimes it's the effects and the sets, and the locations. I think obviously like a lot of people, remember James Bond movies more so by their location than necessarily what the plot was.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, a number of I really, with music, I think only if I'm really really digging the music.
And then do you almost miss the plot when the music's
Yes.
really good? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm completely wrapped up in the music for sure.
Yes.
I think for me, and it's pretty fresh in my mind, so I'm glad you asked this. I recently watched The Godfather for the first time in my life. And
For the first time. Wow.
yeah, yeah. I'd heard about it my whole life. I'm 26, and my dad had them on DVD. I just I never watched them, and I finally watched them. And I noticed I really appreciate when films have um like character themes or like recurring motifs that sort of signal like their cues. I noticed like a lot of newer films, and this can be cool sometimes, but like they're sort of funneling in like popular music or like sort of have a soundtrack or pop songs to sort of set the scene. That can be cool, but I always appreciate like an original score. That kind of thing sticks with me. And The Godfather has a lot of that. Like there's this sort of main theme that's kind of like mournful and wistful yet like elegant, and
The
that stuck with me. Yeah.
da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
Yeah, that
So
one.
is that why you chose to watch that movie? Because you knew it had that, or
Well,
was it
I
a
didn't.
surprise?
It was a
Oh,
surprise, and I'm like, wow, I really dig this.
cool.
um yeah. I think it was in both one and two. I actually didn't watch three because I'd heard things, and I usually don't let reputation influence whether or not I watch a film. But before I decided, like I just went and kind of poked around and watched a clip or two on YouTube, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if The Godfather 3 is on the same level, so I'll
So it
just sit
didn't
this one
carry
out.
over. Hmm.
Yeah, I sat that one out. But yeah, music definitely factors in a lot for me when I watch a film.
No,
It can.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I gotta say, when you were talking about pop music in films today,
Mhm.
I absolutely hate it, especially as we're getting closer to like the music supervisors for films being people my age.
Yeah.
I'm hearing music that I grew up on. I hate it. I can't stand it. I'm hearing like pop songs and hip hop songs from when I was a teenager, and it throws me off. It completely throws me off. So, for
Mm.
instance, unless it's used to a specific effect, like in Perks of Being a Wallflower, there's a lot of music that's like classic rock and stuff from the 70s and 80s, and that is to capture the feel of that period. Or
Yeah.
Boyhood, the film from just a couple years ago that they filmed over 12 years. Each song that's in there is to mark a change
Oh,
in time.
Right.
fascinating. When you were saying the motifs in The Godfather,
Yeah.
um, and I guess maybe I call them metaphors, but that's part of design too. So it's not just, maybe you were
Right.
referring to music, I'm not sure, but that's interesting to me too. When you see something in design that is used as a motif or a metaphor throughout it. Hitchcock was just a genius at that.
Yeah, I've gotten acquainted with Hitchcock through working with Lyle a lot. Seen a few of his films now. I also enjoy him quite a bit. I believe it was what film was it?
I think Vertigo and Psycho I showed you.
Yeah, it's Vertigo that I'm thinking of. What got me is sort of that ending scene, of course. Was it like a clock tower or something like that?
He climbs to the bell tower.
The
Yeah,
bell
at
is a bell tower.
like
Yeah, and
a monastery kind of place. Yeah.
yeah, and that stuck with me. I was thinking though about The Godfather as far as like you were saying, like that like motifs and how that factors into design too. Um just about like I guess interiors and things in those films, they're living in a very um I guess pretty expensive looking, affluent, sleek home. But it also feels kind of claustrophobic, and I figure that's probably by
Hmm.
design. Um
Ooh. See,
like
good catch. Yeah.
yeah, it's like there's the part at the very end of The Godfather, which I'm sure is intentional because I know when it comes to filmmaking, pretty much everything we see on screen is intentional. But at the end, um, his wife Kay like asks him if he, I guess, ordered this hit, and he just outright lies to her, but she believes him. And after that, she goes out of the room, like his office, to I guess like make tea or like pour coffee or something. And she kind of looks back into the room, and he's like surrounded by his like mafia family and everything, and the door closes, and that's set with me because I'm like that sort of signals that
Mm,
separation now in their relationship. There's always going to be this barrier between him and her
right.
because of this life that he lives now. And
Cool.
I think of like a branch out, sort of zoom out, and like that house as a whole can be sort of prison, despite looking the way it does. So
Yeah. Oh, interesting
yeah.
insight. You were talking about Vertigo, and I just read an article where he put a lot of little motifs in there, and one was, because Vertigo is about spinning, being dizzy,
Yeah.
and it was throughout the film. But they pointed out that even her hairstyle, Tippi Hedren's, her little bun on top. Oh wait, no, Kim Novak, sorry.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I think I read
it
about
was,
this too,
oh yeah,
actually.
you
Yeah.
did. So it must have just been a
Yeah.
recent article that it was twisted and it was on purpose, and they'd show when they focused on it. He
Yeah.
just went to the nth degree with the detail.
Yeah. Yeah, I love stuff like that.
Me
um
too.
is has there been a project yet where you really want to do it, but it's gonna take like I guess more I guess like skill develop, like you don't want to approach it until after a certain point? Like is there like a project that it's like you want to do it, but it's gonna take a while to lead up to? Like for instance, me, like I know one day I want to make an album where like I'm doing all of the music myself, but first I need to learn how to play the piano. So like until then, I'm just like, all right, I'll give it a few years.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Well, the Munsters actually is kind of going to be like that because I'm, like I said, trying to do the animation. But what usually intimidates me is the size of the project. So people have suggested, oh, like the Overlook Hotel. Oh, totally want to do that. From help me out
Shining.
here, Shining.
Shining,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, that thing's huge. That will
Right.
take a really long time. And people have mentioned Downton Abbey. Again, that would take an incredible amount of time. Yeah. But I like learning new things. That's why one of the reasons I wanted to do Munsters was, okay, now I'm forced to learn something new
Right.
here. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and I got to figure out how to add cobwebs, which will be very interesting. Oh, and I'm not going to redo the Munsters. There's no way I'm going to do a modern version of how they'd be living now. I think it would be the same. It would just have more dust, more cobwebs. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, given the subject. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah, that's I relate to that. A lot of times I have to sort of just take on the project and not think too much because like I know I'm going to have to force myself to do it. Otherwise I won't do it.
Hey,
Yeah.
Um
Mel, not for nothing. With us in 2016 pivoting from rap to pop music and kind of
but yeah.
trafficking in that exclusively, it took us now 3 albums to get to a point where we feel like we even have a handle on how to make pop music.
Yeah. I mean, we've
Yeah.
made We just completed like the third album since we've been doing this, but the first two, like I feel like recently, I was able to say, okay, we fell on our faces, but it makes sense because we'd never done this before. And even now, I don't feel like I've mastered pop music, but it took like a steady diet and research and trial and error, to get to a point where I feel like, okay, now I sort of understand this from a technical standpoint to where I can inject some flair and personality. Like, coming from rap, hip hop, listening to that stuff pretty much my whole life. I listen to other genres too, but that was what I did, was like rap music. And then, working with Lyle, he introduced like Billy Joel
Oh,
and, things of that nature. And so from that, and it just sort of had to marinate and really settle in. It took 3 years for it to finally click and me to be able to utilize this knowledge. Um, so yeah, I
and
know what
you're
it's
always going
like.
to hate your first everything, right? Like when
Yeah.
you go back, like I have drawings I did or stills I did in the beginning that on my Facebook page, I actually went back and deleted all of them. But I remember at the time, I thought, this is great, and I
Right.
threw it up there. Yeah, it's like the first pancake, right? It's
Yeah.
always going to be a flop, but you have to go from somewhere. I
Right.
took this online course from someone that does YouTube videos before I started mine. And she said just that exact thing. You're going to hate your first video, but you have to just start. If you put it off until you're ready, pretty soon it's just, you're never ready. It just becomes your turn or your time.
Right. Yeah. I think and I don't know if this will apply to you too, but I think sort of the curse too of being an artist or being someone that works creatively with things is, you'll end up hating that first thing, but also it'll come to be the thing that defines you sometimes. Like people will tell me like, "Oh, I really love that thing." And it's just like,
Oh,
like but I'm so much better now. Like, it's
huh,
but that first impression always sort of sticks with people for better or for worse.
huh. Do you think that's true with really huge musical artists too? Do you think they hate their first work that we know them for that's iconic?
I know a lot of artists, aren't too hot on like their most popular thing or their first thing, but for a lot of people, that was their first experience and sort of that formative moment. And nostalgia factors in a lot for people and just where they were in their lives. It's like, oh, this is great. How could you not? And it's one of those things where being the creator, you're always going to have a different perspective from the people who are actually engaging and consuming with
If
what
you're
you
if you're
make.
doing it right, you're probably always feeling like you're getting better too.
Right. You're always
Yes.
a step past whatever you just did. So, yeah, I mean, I've done, just my own work, but also researching artists that I'm fond of. Um, I've seen it. It's pretty common. Like it's like, oh, my first album, it's like the one that people like the most, and they always want them to go back to that.
Hmm.
From everyone from like Nirvana, like I read, I guess like Kurt Cobain, Smells Like Teen Spirit is huge, iconic, like pop culture,
Yeah.
hallmark. And he was like, well, I was just trying to imitate a Pixies song, and he's like,
Hmm.
it wasn't really like a thing. Like I knew it was gonna be big, sort of, but like because of that, he doesn't have the same attachment to it that he does another record, and like, um, for instance, in hip hop, the artist Nas, like his first album is the one that everyone heralds. It's like part of the hip hop canon. It's the one that people always
It's
point
the
to.
Citizen Kane of hip hop, probably.
Right. Yeah, and for him, I'm sure that's probably like frustrating because he's released like a dozen albums since
Right,
then,
and he
but it's
was what,
always getting
18 or
compared.
19 when he put that album out.
Yeah, and it's right. He was a teenager, literally, and so
Hmm.
I'm sure to him it's probably kind of unfair because it's like I didn't even know really entirely what I was doing completely. Like it was good, but I've learned so much since then. You
He
know,
was such an anomaly, though. I mean, in most cases, I find that as an artist, you get this first feeling of, in music at least, when you record something, it's this thing
the
that I call
sound of
like,
your own voice.
yeah, the sound. Like you right now, you're just enthralled with the idea that your voice is on a recorded song, and once that honeymoon period sort of fades away, is where you start peeling away the layers of your skill level, and where do I need to be at, what am I trying to get to, and then you start achieving. Then you start going for it, but people still may remember you from those first recordings and either hold that against you or hold you to that. So if you don't live up to those first recordings, you're in this never-ending cycle of trying to get back to this thing that you'll never be able to get back to.
Right.
Yes, the magic. Yeah.
I guess my question would be, has there been any time since like some of your earlier projects where like you've learned more since then, and like have you ever had the urge to want to go back and like tweak things, or once you're done do you just sort of leave it alone?
Oh no, heavens yes. I always want to go back. And in fact, I did with some of them. I want to redo all of them.
Okay, yeah.
But when I learned a new technique with the lens. So when I was doing those walkthroughs, I was using the default setting. And so in some of mine, you might notice that the room looks really wide. It's got a wide angle lens look to it. So I did go back and redo some of those so they look more natural. But
Okay.
even, there's so many things I'd change. I just wish there was more than one of me. I clone me and say, go work on Dick Van Dyke and come back when you're done.
Right. Yeah, I think though that's the mark of someone who is dedicated and has that obsession. There's always that desire to tweak and alter and upgrade and enhance, and I imagine with something like this, it's probably, even more, I guess, intense. Because music is sort of a thing where you'll reach a point and it's like, this is as good as I can get it, or this is, you don't want to go back and mess with too much, because a lot of music has to traffic in sort of that ethereal feeling based sort of thing. You can't really recapture that moment. But I'm guessing with something like, architecture, like 3D rendering, you can always reopen it and go back in and,
And the
tweak the setting a
technology
bit.
keeps
Yeah.
changing too. Yeah. So you find out, oh, now I can make it rain outside. Well, I want to
Right.
go back and make it rain
Yeah.
outside. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you see artists too in all fields. Sometimes they just get famous for a certain thing, and so they just stick with it, and it becomes almost cliche, and that's never good. They just become
Right,
a caricature. Yeah.
That becomes their trademark, and you come to expect it from them. Where
Yeah, and they don't evolve.
Every single thing you see from them is some sort of spin-off on this one idea, this one design.
Right. Or you'll hear the music start. It's a new song, and you go, oh, I know who that artist is because it sounds like all their other work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Nickelback.
Oh, my. Yes.
So
they get a bad rep, but I mean, I guess I have to go more into their catalog to know if like the stereotypes are true.
Mel, I like a bunch of Nickelback songs, but the fact remains, someone layered them on top of each other. They have the same exact arrangements, the vocals come in at the exact same moment. I mean, they're carbon copies of each other.
You mean somebody actually did that?
Yeah, they layered the wave files of Photograph and You Remind Me on top of each other, I believe.
Oh, man.
And they're structured exactly the same. And the inflections change at the same point. It's eerily similar.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Well, and it works, and
it worked, records, and they're very successful. So, obviously they're doing something right.
Yeah. They have their audience, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's always, I think, that trap too of, if something's working, as an artist, it's like, well, why mess with it? And then there's also that tug of wanting to take it to a different place, wanting to elevate, wanting to expand. But it's like, you're afraid if you do that, you're going to lose people, so it's,
yeah.
And that's the struggle, it's almost, with us, when we've made music together, Mel, I've always said I don't want any project to sound like the last one we did.
Yeah, like what we just did.
Yeah. I get that. Yep. Especially, I do that with the design. When I redesign a home, I don't want it to in any way reflect what I just did on the last project or any of my projects. I want it to be new and fresh.
Right.
Yeah. And I try to avoid trends too. Every once in a while I'll put something in and I'll think, oh wait, that's trendy right now. So I take it back out.
Yeah.
That's how you set trends.
Right. trend setting is a difficult game because it's the person who set the trend hardly ever gets the recognition. It's always usually the person after.
Oh, yeah, probably,
Yeah, I
huh?
mean, there's this like unfortunate like sort of concept in music. Maybe it's just hip hop. I don't know. It's probably not music in general, but it's like it's not. The phrase goes like it's not about who did it first; it's about who did it right.
Hmm.
And like to a degree, I get that, but it's also like
But what that
it's not
really means is it's not about who did it first. It's about who with a name, who with an audience, and who with a following was
Hmm.
able to take that thing and elevate it to a platform that the person who may have created it didn't have.
right.
Oh, interesting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, well, for the record, if someone comes out and they start doing what you're doing, we will say on record that it was Marina Coates who did it first. You know,
Thank you. You got my
uh,
back. Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Because I've
and it's true. Anybody could start doing TV and movie homes and walking us through them. That's why I kind of like the cinematically inspired design because that's what I haven't seen,
right.
and I don't know why. I don't know why that hasn't been done, but so if that gets copied, I'll be sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, though. I mean, the whole concept, why don't people model their homes after what they see in set? Because a lot of what we see in films and TV is pretty cool, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
we'll fall in love with them. But
right.
everybody has their. You guys have your favorite homes, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people will even be like Starship Enterprise, because they want to picture
Right.
themselves on there. And I'm not talking about copying it either, because anybody can do that. It's just taking those principles. What makes those homes work? Why do we fall in love with them? And part of it was they weren't doing trends. That wasn't what they were about. They were trying to show more of this family or this character. How can
Right.
we show who they are? And that's why it's not trend like. And that's why you can go back to the 40s, 50s, 60s, and those homes, you could still live in them today. Like you might change the fabric on the couch or the wallpaper, but they'd still work. It's because it wasn't about trends. I love everything about the cinema's design, where they're coming
Yeah.
from. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I'll
in a
go
weird,
ahead.
I'm sorry, in a weird way, do you think that like reality TV is going to possibly bring about a resurgence in, because those are, now that I'm thinking about it, the throughout my life, the Real World
Yeah, I
and
remember that. Yeah.
each different, it's these strangers are living in a different house. And I used to look at these houses and go, who the hell designed this house? Where did they find these places? I've never seen a house designed like this before. Some of them would look amazing. Some of them would look like a TGI Fridays. But, those were some of the first houses growing up that on television in the modern day, that and the early sitcom houses that was in apartments like Seinfeld, Family Matters, Fresh Prince, stuff like that. That's what I grew up watching. So
Fresh Prince, that's one I want to do.
oh yeah, that would be
Yeah,
awesome.
that's one that's pretty iconic, as the kids say.
You know what? Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine.
What I would love to see is a theme park kind of place that looks just like a city with
Oh
blocks
yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
And every house is a different famous house we know from either movies or TVs, and we get to walk through them. And everything's exactly there, every item. Oh, I would pay big bucks to walk through that.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Lyle and I are both big theme park guys. In fact, wasn't one of your goals to open a theme park one day, Lyle?
Well, I shared with you my vision board, which now I'm feeling like I regret. But
What was
no,
it going to be? What would your
well,
theme park be?
the thing is that when I was in an old rap group, we were um, establishing, I guess, the lore of the universe. But really, what my actual like end goal in life is, if I could retire on this note and just do this for the rest of my life, I want to own, operate, design, create the greatest haunted house walkthrough for all times and have it open year round, not just in September and October. So,
Okay.
if
I
I
would be
could,
first in line. That sounds
yeah,
awesome.
well, thank you. If I could swing it, one day my ultimate goal would be to open, either a haunted theme park or at the very least a standalone haunted house that, I'd spend the rest of my days putting all the love and care and scares into for generations to come.
Oh, that would be awesome. What would be the perfect city to put that in? That's what I'm trying to think of.
Well, something, I'm in LA right now, but I would have to do it in Long Island, New York, where I grew up. And I'm getting a little choked up talking about this, but um, when I was growing up, we had a guy in our neighborhood named Henry, and Henry would kind of starting right after Labor Day, he would start with his kids, Tommy and Amanda. They would redesign their garage into a haunted walkthrough. And every year, when I lived in the neighborhood, I was either going to Henry's haunted house or I was acting in it, and as a scare actor. And I would do it. Henry actually just passed away recently,
Oh.
so that's why I'm getting a little choked up here. But
So you
um,
still kept in contact with them all these years?
I no, we didn't stay in contact, and they actually moved to Atlanta, I believe, or just Georgia proper. Um, they stopped doing the haunted house. We everyone grew up and went their separate ways and everything like that, followed their own path in life. But I would bring the haunted house back to Long Island, preferably the neighborhood I grew up in,
Mm-hmm.
or within driving distance of there. And there was another amazing haunted house in Long Island that would run out of the fire department in Massapequa called Darkness Rising, that was all volunteer. And they stopped running as well, I believe, in 2014. So, in terms of haunted attractions on like the sort of area of Long Island that I'm referring to, we don't have anything other than there's this Bayville Scream Park, but it doesn't run year round. It's only September, October. So I
Mm-hmm.
would bring that, ideally in a storybook ending for my life. I would bring the haunted house to Long Island, and
Yeah.
that would be something to hang my hat on. But who knows? Who knows what
And
direction life will take me in?
there aren't any that are open year round, right?
Now there are a few, but I don't think
Oh.
there are any in New York. I don't think there are any in Los Angeles. Well, there's one, but it's kind of extreme and bad, and I have a problem with them. But
Okay.
they've been on the news.
Oh, oh.
Yeah, they're a little crazy. I did actually do this one in New York in 2014 called Blackout, where they make you sign a waiver before you go in, because the actors basically are allowed to touch you. They're allowed to throw you on the ground.
Oh.
You're pretty much giving them your body to do whatever. And that was a bit much. But this other thing, the one that runs year round in California, is that, but worse, and apparently 4 hours long.
Oh, wow.
So,
How long
um,
would yours be? What do you picture yours being?
probably like a 20-minute walkthrough.
Hmm.
A nice walkthrough. I've done standalone houses that, even when I walk really slow and I want to look at every little thing in the room, which I'll be going next week actually to Knott's Scary Farm, which I go to every year since I moved out here. And I'm such a weirdo because like I'm in the haunted room and they're trying to scare me, and I'm looking at all the design of everything, and it really is like my number one happy place, my true escape from reality.
I gotta admit, I love Halloween. I do.
Oh, me too. And for me, it starts as soon as Labor Day ends, and they start putting out the Halloween stuff at Target, and it's my time.
Yep.
Well, I guess I'll just add, just sort of to end, and sort of tie everything together. While you're saying you'd like to build this haunted house one day, well, speaking of just architecture and interiors and just like mystery and intrigue and wanting to see inside of something, here in Peoria, Illinois, where I was born,
Oh, the house, the big
yeah,
house.
it's there's a house here in town. It's like a lot of us just refer to it as the castle. It's literally a castle, which is very weird because like this isn't like, you know, Russia somewhere. Like, so for there to be like a castle in the middle of Peoria, it's pretty insane. But they open, I guess, like, they do like events for kids like during Halloween and things. Like they do have owners, but every now and then like the house is for sale. But this castle, like I've always wondered about, and my whole life I've been preoccupied with like going inside, or at least seeing. There are pictures available online to see inside of the house, but like I'm still not satisfied. Like one day.
Did you say it's on the market right now?
It was recently, and someone bought it, and that was kind of a bummer. Even though I was nowhere close to having like the millions of dollars to buy it, every time it is like I always just sort of look at the same pictures over and over of the house. But yeah, like it's a literal castle, like it's built like a castle. And
what's the story? How did a castle end up in Peoria?
What is the story? It's there's like a whole website dedicated to it.
Well, I wrote it down. I'm going to look that up one more time.
Yeah, I believe if you just type Peoria, Illinois castle, like it'll probably pop up. But I believe it's someone, I guess, moved into Peoria a long time ago, and they were pretty wealthy. And it's just been passed down, I guess, through their family and also other people. But like part of, I guess, the intrigue is like no one knows for sure like what the origin story is, and or what's going on inside, because I guess the owners are kind of secretive.
Cool.
But, yeah, one day I hope to purchase the house and live in it.
What did it sell for? Do you know?
Yeah, it was let me see. It was, I believe, somewhere like 1 or 2 million, I want to say, something like that.
Oh, I gotta look that up.
Yeah.
Wonder how old it is.
Well, I believe it goes back to like it goes back to like the 30s. Yeah.
During the Depression. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, it's all over the internet. But yeah, that's kind of been another thing in my life as far as like architecture goes and houses, and just wanting to walk through it, one day. Like I actually, it's funny, as a delivery driver, one time, I've been doing it like since spring of last year, but someone actually ordered food there, and I was so excited. But unfortunately, like they were like, "Oh, we'll just meet you outside of, the gate," and I'm like, "Oh no!"
But that
like
adds
I thought
to the
was,
mystique. Too,
yeah,
right?
because I was so close. I thought like, "Oh, they come to the door and I get to see inside," but like it wasn't like that. But yeah.
Maybe at Halloween you could go by.
Yeah, I've
trick or treat, borrow a kid,
Right, yeah, and just hopefully one day.
Mel, you just reminded me, as we were on the topic of bringing a haunted house to Long Island, this castle, we kind of have something like that nearby my house, which it's called the St. Ignatius Retreat Home.
And I'm writing this down. Ignatius. Okay.
It's the St. Ignatius Retreat Home, and it, to my knowledge, was in the process of actually being demolished. and it got, from what I understand, they restored it, and it was on the market back in April.
Hmm.
I have to look it up.
This
Did it sell?
actually the proper okay, so yeah, the demo was actually completed. Which is very sad because it was a beautiful building, almost like a castle, and it did sell the property for $110 million.
Oh, wow.
It was
Yeah, it's a little over my budget.
it was a 93-year-old Catholic sanctuary in the North Hills.
Wow.
Cool.
And
I
it was,
wonder
I
what they're
mean,
going
we
to
used
turn
to
it
drive
into.
up there just at night. We would drive up, and it was huge. I mean, it was like the biggest building I'd ever seen in my life. It just reminded me, like, oh man, it would have been cool had they not demoed it to build the haunted house in there.
Yeah, exactly.
But
that'd be cool. Kind of a
this
Harry
is
Potter feel to it.
oh yeah. So this is it. Three creatives, three dreamers talking here on Conversations.
Yeah, we know you're busy. Like you were saying, like 10 hours a day. We really do thank you for taking just 1 hour out of your day and speaking to us, because we
This
just
was
knew.
fun.
Yeah, we knew we had to try to get you on the show once we saw what you were doing. As fans of TV and me being fan of just interiors of homes, like, yeah. So
Well, keep
thanks
your eye
again.
out for Tales from the Crypt. I'm going to look that up, and maybe next Halloween we'll see.
Wow. Well, guys, if you're listening, by the time this airs, which should be coming out at the end of September, this Munster house will be coming. And from the sounds of things, this is going to be on a whole nother level. Check that out. Marina, you want to plug all your social networks, your website, everything like that?
Oh, sure. Thanks. So I just started 2 new shows on YouTube, and one of them is called Behind the Scenes, and that's where I explore TV and movie homes. But as I walk us through them, I give fun facts and stories. I hide Easter eggs, things like that from the shows.
Okay.
But the other one, which I love, is Cinematically Inspired Design, and it's where I take the principles from the cinema, the design principles, and teach us how to bring them into our homes. Those are both found on YouTube under just my name, Marina Coates. But then you can also put Marina Coates Mockingbird Lane, and that's the whole name of it. But I think you'll find it just with my name. And then I'm Mockingbird Lane Design on everything else. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Actually, I think on Twitter they switched it around. It's like Lane Mockingbird.
Lane Mockingbird.
Yeah.
Well, check her out, guys. Her work is honestly really amazing, and I love people who dedicate their lives to doing awesome things, and that's why we have a show like Conversations, to bring these awesome people to you. So thank you again, Marina, for your time. It was really a pleasure having you on here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.